I was in the hospital after an accident. My wife never visited. When I called, she said, "You're not worth it." My stepson added, "We don't miss you." Welcome to today's story. But before we dive in, I'd really appreciate it if you could help me reach 1,000 subscribers soon to keep the motivation going and bring more great stories your way. Thank you so much. Now, let's jump into today's story. The character you're about to follow faces a situation many of us could relate to. Have you ever found yourself trapped in a situation where everything you thought was solid, your relationship, your future, your trust, suddenly shattered? Maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe you felt completely alone. Well, today we're going to see how this character tackles those feelings and rises above it all. Stick around until the end to see how they overcome this crisis and take back control of their life. It was an ordinary day, or so I thought. I've worked construction for nearly 15 years, but that afternoon in late spring was different. The floor was slippery, the scaffold unstable. And before I even realized what happened, the whole structure collapsed beneath me. I felt my leg snap, a rib crack, and something I couldn't quite place in my chest puncture. I was still conscious enough to hear the chaos around me, the frantic shouts of my colleagues, but all I could focus on was the pain, the sharp, biting pain. When they rushed me to the hospital, I was barely aware of anything, but I could hear the quiet hum of machines, the murmur of the nurses, the occasional beep. The worst part? I couldn't even reach out for help. Not from her. Amelia, my wife, the woman who had promised to love me in sickness and in health. I called her the moment I got settled into my room. "Babe, I'm in a pretty bad spot here, you need to come," I said, trying to sound as calm as I could. The phone rang twice before she picked up. The background noise was loud, a TV show blaring. She barely acknowledged what I said. "I'll come tomorrow, okay?" She replied like she was too distracted to even care. The next day came. No Amelia. The next week, still nothing. It was as if I didn't exist in her world anymore. The days started to blur together, each one feeling like a slow, suffocating wave of loneliness. With every passing hour, the hope of hearing from Amelia seemed more like a distant memory. I had been waiting for her to show up, to call, to ask how I was holding up, but all I got was silence. I found myself lying there, staring at the hospital ceiling, the hum of the machines around me the only sound in the sterile room. There were times I would close my eyes and imagine her standing by my bed, holding my hand, whispering that everything would be okay. But when I opened them, the emptiness would settle in again. I tried calling her multiple times each day, hoping for any sign, any voice on the other end, but all I ever heard was the automated response, or, at best, a cold, distracted voice. "Hey, it's me," I'd say, trying to keep my tone light. "How's everything at home? You all right?" And she'd respond, her words clipped, distant. Yeah, everything's fine here. I'll come by later. I'm just dealing with some stuff." But she never came. She never called back. And that later never came. It felt like I was being erased from her world, like I was no longer a priority, no longer her husband. The doctors and nurses would look at me with pity, their eyes telling me what they couldn't say aloud. "Your wife doesn't care. She's not coming." It stung every time they asked about her. Some of them seemed uncomfortable with my repeated questions about her whereabouts, their awkward glances giving me the answer I already knew but was too scared to admit. By the second week, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Utter hopelessness. The hospital room, which should have felt like a place of recovery, became a prison. The pain meds helped numb the physical agony, but nothing could dull the ache in my chest. I kept replaying the same thought over and over. Why? Why wasn't she here? What happened to us? The moments when I was conscious and aware of my surroundings became fewer and farther between. Sometimes I would drift in and out of sleep, but even when I was awake, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was alone, that she was slipping further and further away. It wasn't just the physical pain that wore me down. It was the emotional exhaustion of constantly wondering if I was ever going to matter to her again. Was I invisible to her now? One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I called her again, for what felt like the 100th time. My fingers trembled as I dialed her number, my heart beating faster with each ring. She picked up after a few seconds, her voice low and distracted. "Hey, I said, trying to mask the desperation creeping into my tone. Just wanted to see how you're doing. I've been waiting for you to come by. You said you'd visit. Oh, I know. I've been really busy. Engage has a game tonight, so You know how it is. I'll come by tomorrow, she said, her voice as flat as ever. Tomorrow. Again. I wanted to scream, to beg her to come, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something in me had already started breaking. The fragile hope I had left crumbling with every passing second. As the days turned into weeks, it became clear that I was no longer a priority for her. I started questioning everything, our marriage, my own worth, and even the very love I thought we had. Was this how she had always felt? Had I been blind to it, or had I just refused to see it? Was I truly nothing more than an inconvenience to her? Claire, my sister, continued to visit me. She brought updates about our dog, Buddy, who seemed to be doing fine. And she made sure I had something warm to eat. But even her visits felt like a lifeline that was slowly fading. She would talk to me about everyday things, about her kids, her work, but I could see the concern in her eyes, the way she would glance at me every time I mentioned Amelia. Claire's face grew more and more serious as the days went by. I could tell she was getting frustrated with the situation. Every time she came, she asked me, gently at first, but increasingly with more urgency, "Have you heard from Amelia? Is she coming to see you?" "No," I would reply, my voice tinged with the same resignation. "I've tried calling, I've left messages. She's too busy." One day, as she sat beside my bed, stirring the spoon in her coffee absent-mindedly, she suddenly said, "Ethan, you really think she cares about you? You're just an afterthought to her." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't wanted to believe it. I had been living in a bubble, pretending that everything would turn out fine, that eventually Amelia would show up and everything would be all right. But the truth was so much harder to face. Claire wasn't saying anything new. I already knew it deep down, but hearing it from her made the reality hit even harder. That was the moment I finally let go of the last shred of denial. I was lying in that hospital bed, the oxygen mask over my face, my leg in a cast, and I realized I am alone. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. The woman I had spent the last 8 years of my life with, the woman I had loved and trusted, had completely checked out of our marriage. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, the harsh hospital lights flickering above me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even close my eyes without seeing the image of Amelia's face, looking at me with that cold, disinterested expression. I thought about the time we had shared, the anniversaries, the holidays, the little moments that made up our life. But now, they felt like they belonged to someone else. The life I thought we had, the love I thought we shared, was nothing but an illusion. By the time the second week came to a close, I was a shell of the man I had been. I was no longer holding on to the hope that she would come to visit me, that things would somehow go back to the way they were. I had accepted that I was not the man she wanted anymore, that I was just another part of her life that she could push aside when it became inconvenient. I didn't know where that left me. But one thing I did know was that I could no longer pretend. I couldn't keep lying to myself, holding on to a love that was slipping away with each passing day. The hardest part was that it wasn't just Amelia who had disappeared, it was the man I had been. The man who believed in love, in commitment, in the promise of forever. And now, I had to figure out who I was without her. That was when I made the decision that would change everything. I had to face reality. And reality was brutal. For weeks, I had been living in a state of disbelief, clinging to a fragile thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, Amelia would come around. I kept telling myself that everything would be fine, that she was just stressed, that she was dealing with something else. But deep down, I knew the truth was something far darker. I didn't want to believe it at first. I didn't want to think that the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted with my future, could do something so cold. But Claire's voice kept echoing in my mind. "You really think she cares about you? You're just an afterthought to her." Claire had been worried for me, and I could hear it in her voice every time she came by to visit. She never asked directly about Amelia, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She kept pushing me to check our finances. "Ethan, you need to know what's going on. You can't keep pretending this is just a phase." I resisted. I told myself that it was just a rough patch, that Amelia would come through. But after 2 weeks, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was falling apart in that sterile hospital room, and the only thing that still tied me to my old life was the idea that I wasn't alone, that Amelia was out there, that she cared enough to at least check in. but the silence screamed louder than anything. So I did it. I sat down at the small desk in my room, Claire beside me, and I logged into our shared account. The password was still the same. I had always trusted her to handle the finances, but now I felt like I was opening a door to a room full of secrets I wasn't ready to face. At first, nothing seemed out of place. A few small purchases here and there, some bills paid, just the usual. But as I scrolled down, I felt my heart begin to race. In the past month alone, more than $5,000 had been withdrawn. The ATM withdrawals were from places I didn't recognize, strange locations. Unfamiliar to me. My head began to spin as I clicked through the transactions, trying to make sense of it all. Then my stomach dropped. A $2,000 transfer to a jewelry store. Jewelry. Amelia didn't wear jewelry. She had always said it was too expensive and that the only piece she needed was the wedding ring I had given her. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to make sense of the numbers in front of me. I could feel the blood drain from my face, my hands shaking as I scrolled through more transactions. Some were transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, accounts I wasn't even aware existed. I didn't need to see more. The truth was already staring me in the face. She wasn't just ignoring me. She was hiding something far worse. She was doing something with someone else. That was the moment I felt my world shatter. The weight of the truth crashed down on me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and all I could do was stare at the screen. It was all there in black and white. The betrayal, the lies, the secrets. It was too much to bear. I sat there in silence for what felt like hours, but it was only a few minutes. I turned to Claire, who had been watching me quietly. She could see the color draining from my face, the way my hands trembled. Without saying a word, she reached for the phone. "Call her," Claire urged. "You deserve to know the truth from her." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I picked up the phone and dialed Amelia's number, my heart racing. I had to hear her voice. I had to confront her. But deep down, I already knew. I knew what was going to happen. I knew that this was the end. The phone rang, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. But then her voice came through, casual and indifferent, as if nothing had changed. "Hey," she said, her tone flat, distant. "What's up?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why haven't you visited me, Amelia? I've been in here for weeks. I've tried calling, I've left messages. Why aren't you here?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then the words that hit me like a sledgehammer. "You're not worth the gas money, Ethan. Either heal quickly or die fast. I'm done with this." Her words were like daggers. Cold. Heartless. I could barely breathe, barely process what she was saying. My heart felt like it was being ripped out of my chest. How could she say that? How could she speak to me like I was nothing? I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest heavy. I wanted to scream at her, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't. It was like a switch had flipped. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was gone. Before I could gather myself, I heard a voice in the background, Ben, my stepson. His voice was shaky, his words uncertain, but they cut just as deeply. "We don't miss you, Dad." I froze. It wasn't just Amelia. Ben, the kid I had raised, the kid I had tried to be a father to, had turned against me. His voice cracked as he said those words, and I could hear the strain in it, the guilt. He didn't want to say it. He didn't want to hurt me, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't say anything. My mind was racing, my emotions all tangled up. I had spent years trying to be the father Ben needed, and now, in one cold, heartless moment, I was nothing to him. The betrayal was complete. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I just hung up. I put the phone down slowly, feeling like a part of me had just died. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what had just happened. But it was real. It was all real. I didn't want to accept it, but I had no choice. The call had ended everything. There was no going back from this. No pretending that things could be fixed. No hope that Amelia would come back. That she would suddenly care about me again. I sat there in silence, staring at the phone in my hand. I didn't feel anger, not right away. I didn't feel sadness either. I just felt empty. And then, that emptiness grew into something more. It became clarity. This was the end. The end of everything I thought I knew. The end of the life I had built with her. The end of the man I used to be. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. It had been a whole month since the accident, and I still felt the weight of it, both physically and emotionally. My leg was still a mess, and it seemed like the pain would never fully go away. There were moments when I thought I'd never walk again without a limp, when the weight of everything, the broken bones, the broken marriage, felt like it would crush me. But something had shifted inside me. Something had broken loose, and I wasn't going to let it hold me down any longer. I lay there in the hospital bed, my leg in a brace, the painkillers barely taking the edge off the searing pain. My thoughts weren't about the pain anymore, though they were about her. They were about the emptiness I felt when I thought about Amelia, the woman I had loved, the woman who had been my partner for so long. I had waited for her to come to me, to apologize, to even care enough to visit. But she never came. Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. The longer I lay there, the more I realized that I couldn't keep doing this to myself. I couldn't keep holding on to a life that wasn't mine anymore. It was time to let go of the illusion, to stop pretending that the woman I had known would suddenly come back to me. She wasn't coming back, and if I kept waiting for her, I'd lose everything: myself, my dignity, my future. It was time to take back control. The decision didn't come easily. I had spent weeks in that sterile room, too weak to really leave, but even when my body couldn't move, my mind had been running a marathon. I wasn't going to lie here anymore, letting her walk all over me. I didn't need her, and I sure as hell didn't need her pity. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet, figuratively and literally. It was a hard realization, but it was one I couldn't ignore any longer. With Claire's help, I made the call. I told the doctors that I was leaving the hospital. They tried to talk me out of it, to convince me that I wasn't ready, that I still needed more time to heal. But the truth was, I had healed enough. I had healed in a way that mattered more emotionally. I wasn't going to stay in that place of helplessness, surrounded by machines and doctors who treated me like a patient, not a person. I needed to take my life back. My leg was still a mess. I could barely walk with a cane, and the pain wasn't gone. But I wasn't going back home. Not to that house. Not with her. I wasn't going to let that place, those memories, keep me trapped in a cycle of self-pity and resentment. The day I left the hospital was a blur of discomfort and determination. Claire helped me pack up my things, and we made arrangements for me to check out a week earlier than planned. She didn't say much about it. She knew how hard it was for me, but she was supportive. Steady in a way I couldn't fully appreciate until later. It felt like I was taking back my power, even if just a little bit. I wasn't ready to go back to the life I had, but I wasn't going to let myself rot in a hospital bed either. I was ready for something new, something different. I moved into a small apartment downtown, away from everything I thought I knew. The apartment was modest, nothing extravagant. It was just a small, one-bedroom place with white walls and wooden floors. But it was mine. It was a place where I could breathe without being reminded of the life I had lost. It wasn't much, but it was everything I needed. I could finally be alone with my thoughts, without the constant reminders of Amelia's absence. I could create my own space, my own rules, and build my own future from the ground up. I didn't expect it to be easy. I didn't expect to feel immediately better. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. It wasn't the kind of freedom that came with having everything figured out. It was the freedom to choose my path, to take control of my future no matter how uncertain it seemed. Amelia tried to call. She left messages, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready for the games. I wasn't ready to hear her pretend like nothing had happened, like everything could go back to the way it was. She didn't deserve my time, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into the toxic cycle we had been living in. I didn't need her anymore. And more importantly, I needed time. Time to breathe. Time to rebuild. Time to reclaim what I had lost. The first few days in the apartment were difficult. I had no furniture, no real sense of home. But I didn't care. I spent most of my time sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, thinking about what I wanted next. I had a lot of quiet moments, staring out the window at the busy street below. There was a certain peace in it, the hum of the city, the sound of life continuing around me even as mine felt like it had stopped. It was in those moments that I realized something important. Life didn't stop just because mine had. People went on living. They went on moving even when they were hurt. And if they could, so could I. I started unpacking the few things I had brought with me from the hospital, my clothes, some books, a few pictures of family and friends. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I made a cup of coffee and sat at the small kitchen table, taking in the space. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of purpose creeping back in. This was my life now, and I was going to shape it. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I had the power to change things. And that was more than I had felt in weeks. As I settled in, I began to take small steps toward feeling like myself again. I called a lawyer about the divorce. I reached out to a therapist to start processing everything that had happened. I worked on getting stronger, physically and emotionally. The pain in my leg was still there, but I was determined to make it through. Every day, I took one more step literally and figuratively. I didn't need to rush. I just needed to keep moving forward. But there were moments, late at night, when everything was quiet, and the weight of it all would settle in when I thought about Amelia. I wondered if she was thinking about me, if she even cared anymore. But I didn't let those thoughts linger for long. I had no time for regret. I had no room for doubt. I had learned that my life was my own, and I would no longer let anyone, least of all her, take that from me. The next few weeks were a blur of new beginnings. I made new routines, new habits. I took walks in the neighborhood, I tried new restaurants, and I even started making small talk with strangers. I was finding pieces of myself I hadn't known were missing. And while I knew I wasn't completely healed physically or emotionally, I was moving in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. And that was enough for now. That was all I needed to know. 2 weeks into my new life, I finally sat down with my lawyer, Alex. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a bulldog in a suit, sharp, precise, and didn't take any crap. I had hired him because I needed someone who could handle the mess of my life now, someone who would fight for what was rightfully mine. It wasn't just about the house, the accounts, and the possessions. It was about taking back the life that had been stolen from me, piece by piece. We went over everything, the house, the accounts, the possessions. Every document Alex presented felt like a reminder of the life I had lost, but I was done looking back. The house that I had worked so hard to build. The accounts that had been drained without my knowledge, the possessions that once symbolized security and love, they all meant nothing to me now. They were just things. Just symbols of a life that was no longer mine. Amelia didn't know it yet, but everything was going to change. I had to remind myself that change was what I needed. And for the first time, I felt like I had control over it. I didn't need her. I didn't need her manipulative ways, her lies, or her empty promises. What I needed was a clean slate. And that's exactly what Alex promised me as he laid out the details of the divorce proceedings. The wheels were in motion and there was no turning back. The final straw came when I got a text from Ben. Ben, my stepson, the boy I had raised like my own. He wanted to visit, to talk. He said it wasn't about Amelia. It was just him. I didn't know what to expect. Was he angry with me? Had Amelia poisoned his mind so thoroughly that he now hated me too? Maybe he would blame me for everything that had happened. Maybe he'd follow his mother's lead and say I'd failed them both. I had seen enough of the world to know how these things usually went. Parents pit their children against each other, and when that happens, someone always ends up broken. But when he arrived, he surprised me. The tension in the air was thick when I opened the door, but the look in Ben's eyes was not what I expected. There was no anger, no resentment. Instead, there was a vulnerability, a kind of pain that mirrored my own. He walked in slowly, as if unsure of his place, and we sat down. The room was quiet. The only sound, the faint hum of the air conditioning in the background. "I know what's going on," Ben said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't sure what he knew, what he had overheard, or how much he had been hurt in the process. His next words hit me harder than anything I had expected. "I overheard Mom and Mark talking about you in the hospital," he continued, his voice shaking slightly. "They said Mom was hoping you'd die so she could take everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Amelia, my wife, the woman I had trusted, had been hoping for my death so she could inherit everything? The reality of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. I had thought I had known her, thought I had understood her, but now I saw her for who she really was: cold, calculating, selfish. Ben looked at me, his eyes full of guilt. He didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but he had to say it. And as much as it hurt, as much as it made my blood boil, I couldn't help but feel a strange relief. At least now I had the truth. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging between us. Neither of us knew what to say next. There was so much unsaid, so many emotions that neither of us could fully express. But then Ben spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I'm sorry for what I said, for the things I did," he said. "I didn't want to choose sides, but I felt like I had to. Mom, she made it hard." I could see it now, the internal struggle Ben had been carrying. He had been caught in the middle of a war he never asked for. Amelia had pitted him against me, manipulating him just like she had manipulated me. It wasn't just the financial betrayal that tore us apart. It was the emotional manipulation, the way she had made us all feel like pawns in her game. "I'm sorry, too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve to be put in the middle. But Ben, you have to know, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to be a father to you." Ben nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I know. I didn't know who to trust anymore." In that moment, everything shifted. Despite everything that had happened, despite the lies, the pain, and the destruction Amelia had caused, I realized something. I hadn't lost Ben. Not completely. And that meant everything to me. Ben wasn't lost to me like Amelia was. He wasn't the one who turned his back. He was still here, still willing to rebuild, still willing to talk, still willing to be a part of my life. It was a small victory, but in that moment, it was everything. I hadn't lost my son, and that made the weight of everything else a little lighter to carry. As for Amelia, she didn't stop trying to manipulate me. She sent texts, made phone calls, always with the same tired routine of asking for forgiveness and making empty promises. She would claim that she had changed, that she was sorry, that she would make everything right. But I knew better now. I knew that the woman who stood before me was not the woman I had fallen in love with. She was a shell, a woman who had long since given up on the things that truly mattered. I was done. I was tired of playing the game. I was tired of pretending that things could be fixed when I knew deep down that they couldn't. I had tried. I had given everything I had. But the truth was that she had already made her choice. She had chosen herself, chosen her greed, her selfishness over everything we had built together. I filed for divorce, and a month later, I was officially free. The process wasn't easy. There were legal battles, paperwork, endless conversations with my lawyer. But with every step, I felt more and more like myself again. Like I was shedding the weight of a life that had never truly been mine. The divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a chapter one had been stuck in for far too long. And as hard as it was, as painful as it was to let go, it was the only way forward. I spent the next few weeks focusing on myself. I started to breathe again, to live again. I found myself in small things. Cooking my own meals, going for walks in the park, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in years. I began to understand that life didn't stop just because things went wrong. Kept moving. And so did I. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the pain. Free from the manipulation, free from the past. And though I wasn't sure where the road ahead would take me, I knew one thing for certain: I was done being someone's second choice. I was done letting someone else dictate my worth. I was taking back control of my life one step at a time. Closing thoughts. 3 months later, things were finally settling down. My leg was healing. My life was starting to look normal again. Ben and I found a rhythm. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was okay. Amelia? She was still trying to get back into my life in her own way. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. Some days I would sit back and laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I finally understood. Life wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding peace again. No more lies, no more manipulation. Just the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I could say that I was actually living. What do you think about the story? Feel free to share your thoughts, reflections, or any feedback in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned for more exciting stories coming your way. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end of the story. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to bring you the next one.